The champion cracked his knuckles as he stepped into the center, the crowd already buzzing with anticipation. He had done this 100 times before, walk in, dominate, and walk out without breaking a sweat. Cameras were up, people were shouting his name, and the energy in the room felt electric. Then his eyes landed on the man standing across from him. A few people in the front row actually laughed, because the opponent didn't look like a threat at all. No flashy entrance, no intimidating stance, no attempt to prove anything. Just a quiet man, standing there like he didn't belong. The champion smirked, tilting his head slightly as he sized him up. "Seriously," he muttered, just loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "This is who I'm up against." More laughter followed. Someone in the audience pulled out their phone, already expecting a quick and embarrassing finish. But the man didn't react. He didn't defend himself, didn't argue, didn't even move. That silence only made things worse. The champion stepped closer now, circling him slowly, like a predator toying with an easy win. "You sure you want this?" he said, a grin spreading across his face. Still nothing. And that's when a few people started whispering, because there was something off. Not fear, not confusion, just calm. A level of calm that didn't match the situation at all. The kind of calm that doesn't come from weakness. It comes from knowing something no one else does. And standing there, completely underestimated, was Ozzy Osbourne. Quiet, unbothered, waiting. It was supposed to be just another high-profile event. One of those nights designed to entertain, impress, and draw a crowd hungry for spectacle. The venue was packed wall to wall, lights blazing overhead, music pulsing through the air as cameras captured every angle. People weren't just watching, they were expecting a show. And at the center of it all stood the champion. He was known for this, not just for winning, but for how he won. Confidence, charisma, and just enough arrogance to keep the audience hooked. He didn't just defeat opponents. He made sure they felt it. Every movement, every word, every smirk was calculated to remind everyone in the room exactly who he was. Undefeated, untouchable. So when the organizers announced it would be a special challenger, the excitement doubled. People leaned forward, curious to see who would dare step into that spotlight against someone like him. They expected someone fierce, someone loud, someone ready to match his energy. Instead, they got silence. When Ozzy Osbourne walked in, the shift was immediate, but not in the way you'd expect. There was no dramatic entrance, no attempt to command attention, no sign that he even cared about the noise around him. He looked ordinary, and in a place like that, ordinary stood out more than anything else. A few people exchanged confused glances. Others chuckled under their breath, already forming their conclusions. To them, this wasn't a serious challenge. It was a mismatch. Even the champion couldn't hide his reaction. The moment he saw Ozzy, his posture relaxed, his shoulders dropping slightly as if the pressure had disappeared. This wasn't going to be a fight. This was going to be a performance. And he was going to enjoy every second of it. But what no one in that room realized, not the crowd, not the cameras, not even the champion himself, was that they were all looking at the situation the wrong way. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room isn't there to prove anything. They're there because they already know how it ends. The champion took a slow step forward, rolling his shoulders as if warming up for something that barely required effort. The smirk on his face hadn't faded. In fact, it had grown sharper, more confident. "This won't take long," he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. People leaned in, phones raised, some already whispering predictions about how quickly this would end. To them, this wasn't a contest. It was entertainment. And the outcome felt obvious. Standing across from him, Ozzy Osbourne didn't move. No reaction. No expression. Just that same quiet presence. The champion circled him slowly now, studying him like he was trying to figure out a joke that hadn't quite landed yet. "You nervous?" he asked, tilting his head. Nothing. Not even eye contact. That silence started to shift the mood, just slightly. At first, it made the champion chuckle. He thought maybe this was fear. Maybe his opponent had already realized a mistake he'd made by stepping into this moment. So he pushed a little further. "You can still walk away," he added, louder this time. No one's gonna blame you. More laughter. But something about it didn't land the same way anymore, because the man in front of him still hadn't reacted. Not a flinch, not a word, not even a hint of hesitation. And now, the crowd began to notice. There's a certain kind of silence that feels normal, and then there's the kind that makes people uncomfortable. This was the second kind. The champion stopped circling. For the first time, he stood still, watching him more carefully. "Say something," he said, a little more direct now. Still nothing. That's when a few whispers started spreading through the audience. Not loud, not obvious, but enough to shift the energy. Some people lowered their phones, slightly. Others leaned closer, trying to read what was happening. Because suddenly, this didn't feel as predictable as it did a minute ago. The champion let out a short laugh, trying to shake it off. "All right," he said, clapping his hands once. "If that's how you want to play it." He stepped in closer now, closer than before, close enough to test boundaries, close enough to provoke a reaction. But again, nothing. And that's when it hit him. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to create a crack in his confidence. Because this wasn't fear. It wasn't hesitation. It wasn't confusion. It was control. And control, in a moment like this, wasn't something he was used to seeing from the other side. The crowd felt it too. That subtle shift, that invisible change in the air. The laughter had faded. The noise had softened. And in its place, something else was building. Tension. Real tension. Because now, for the first time, people weren't watching to see how quickly it would end. They were watching to see what would happen next. And the most unsettling part? Ozzy Osbourne still hadn't said a single word. The air in the room had changed. What started as laughter had turned into something quieter, heavier. The kind of silence that presses in on you without warning. No one said it out loud, but everyone could feel it. This wasn't going the way they expected. The champion felt it most of all. He tried to brush it off, rolling his neck and forcing a small grin, but it didn't come as naturally this time. Just moments ago, he had control of the room. Every word, every movement had pulled reactions exactly the way he wanted. Now, nothing was landing. He took another step closer to Ozzy Osbourne, this time more deliberate, less playful. His eyes narrowed slightly as if trying to read something that didn't make sense. "You think staying quiet makes you tough?" he said, voice lower now, sharper. Still no response. Ozzy stood exactly the same, calm, steady, almost detached from everything happening around him. And that calm, it started to feel louder than anything the champion could say. A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their phones completely now, no longer sure what they were watching. Others leaned forward, their earlier amusement replaced with curiosity, because this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something else. The champion exhaled slowly, then let out a short laugh, forced this time. "All right, I get it," he said, nodding to himself like he'd figured something out. "You're trying to play mind games." He stepped even closer, too close, close enough that there was no space left between them. "You picked the wrong person for that," he added quietly. For a moment, nothing moved. No one spoke. The room felt frozen. And then, finally, Ozzy shifted, just slightly. Not a step, not a dramatic move, just a small lift of his head. His eyes met the champion's for the first time. And everything changed. There was no anger in that look. No fear. No urgency. Just clarity. The kind of look that doesn't react, it decides. The champion felt it instantly. That subtle, almost invisible shift. But it hit harder than anything else so far. Because in that moment, something didn't add up anymore. This wasn't how someone looked when they were outmatched. This wasn't how someone looked when they were about to lose. The grin on the champion's face faded, just for a second, barely noticeable, but enough. Around them, the crowd leaned in even closer, completely silent now. Every eye locked onto the center, every person waiting, without even realizing it, for something to break. The tension was no longer building. It had peaked, and now it was just hanging there. The champion straightened slightly, trying to regain that earlier confidence, but it didn't sit the same way anymore. There was hesitation now, small but real, because deep down, something was telling him this wasn't under control. Not anymore. He took a half step back, just enough to create space again. Tried to reset the moment. Tried to pull things back into his world. But it was too late, because once you feel that kind of presence, you don't unfeel it. And standing right in front of him, calm as ever, was Ozzy Osbourne, no longer underestimated, just waiting. And somehow, that was the most dangerous part of all. The space between them felt different now. Just seconds ago, the champion had owned it, controlled it, shaped it, filled it with his confidence. But now, standing a step back from Ozzy Osbourne, that same space felt uncertain, almost unfamiliar. He flexed his fingers, rolling his shoulders again like he was trying to reset himself. "All right," he said, forcing a small laugh. "Enough games." But it didn't sound the same. It didn't feel the same. Because for the first time that night, he wasn't speaking to dominate. He was speaking to convince himself. The crowd picked up on it instantly. No one laughed this time. No one reacted at all. All eyes stayed locked on the two of them, waiting, watching, sensing that something had shifted in a way they couldn't quite explain. The champion stepped forward again, quicker this time, more direct. If there was any doubt creeping in, he was going to crush it. "You think you're special?" he said, voice rising slightly. "You think standing there like that changes anything?" Still no answer. But Ozzy didn't need to speak, because now his silence wasn't being mistaken for weakness anymore. It was being read carefully. The champion closed the distance again, closer than before, testing the line one more time. And then he reached out, not aggressively, not fully committed, just enough to push the moment further, to force a reaction, to take back control. For a split second, it looked like the same pattern would repeat, that nothing would happen, that Ozzy would remain still, unbothered, unmoved. But this time, something was different. The movement was small, almost invisible to anyone not paying full attention. Ozzy shifted his stance, just slightly, a subtle adjustment, balanced, grounded, intentional. And in that exact moment, the champion froze. It wasn't fear, not fully, but it was recognition, a realization that hit too quickly to process, yet too clearly to ignore, because that wasn't the movement of someone unsure. That wasn't hesitation. That was readiness, real readiness, the kind you don't fake, the kind that doesn't need to be announced. And suddenly, every assumption he had made just minutes earlier started to collapse. The easy win didn't feel easy anymore. The control didn't feel like his anymore. The confidence wasn't as solid as it had been. The champion slowly pulled his hand back, not dramatically, not in defeat, but in hesitation. A hesitation no one had ever seen from him before. Around them, the silence deepened. You could feel it now, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore, because the story everyone thought they were watching was no longer the story unfolding in front of them. Nothing big had happened. No dramatic move. No loud moment. No clear turning point. Just one small shift. One quiet signal. And yet, somehow, everything had changed. Standing there, calm and completely in control, Ozzy Osbourne hadn't said a word. But for the first time that night, he didn't need to. No one moved. For a moment, it felt like time itself had slowed down. The champion stood there, his hand now lowered, eyes locked onto Ozzy Osbourne. But the confidence that once filled his expression was gone, replaced by something else. Something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. The crowd could feel it. That invisible shift had finally become undeniable. This wasn't the same situation anymore. This wasn't control. This wasn't dominance. This was something the champion hadn't prepared for. And then, Ozzy took a step forward. Just one, but it carried weight. Not aggressive, not rushed, measured, deliberate, and somehow final. The champion didn't move this time. Didn't step in. Didn't speak. He just watched. Because now, he wasn't trying to prove anything. He was trying to understand. Ozzy lifted his gaze slightly, meeting his eyes again, fully this time. And when he spoke, it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it cut through the silence like it didn't belong there. "You're done," he said calmly. That was it. No shouting. No build-up. No explanation. Just 4 simple words. But the effect was immediate. The champion blinked. Just once. As if something inside him had paused. Reset, shifted. The room reacted a second later. A ripple, subtle at first. People looking at each other. Whispers returning. But different now. No laughter. No mockery. Just confusion and realization. Because something about the way those words were said. It didn't sound like a challenge. It sounded like a conclusion. The champion exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself, but the energy around him had already changed. The same presence he had laughed at minutes ago now felt overwhelming, not because of what Ozzy had done, but because of what he hadn't needed to do. No performance, no effort, no proving, just certainty. And that certainty spread through the room faster than anything else. The crowd wasn't watching for entertainment anymore. They were witnessing a moment, the moment someone realized, too late, that they had completely misread the situation. The champion took a small step back, then another, subtle, almost unnoticeable, but enough to say what words couldn't. Because in that moment, he understood something that no one had told him. You don't always recognize strength when it's loud. Sometimes it's the quietest person in the room who ends everything. And standing there, unchanged, unshaken, completely in control, was Ozzy Osbourne, the man they laughed at, the man they underestimated, the man who never needed to prove a thing. Because by the time they realized who he was, it was already over. The silence didn't break right away. It lingered, heavy, uncomfortable, real, the kind of silence that only happens when everyone in the room realizes they got it wrong. Just minutes ago, the crowd had been laughing, pointing, whispering, expecting an easy show. Phones were up, ready to capture a quick, one-sided moment they could replay later. Now, no one was recording. Most had lowered their hands without even noticing, because what they were witnessing no longer felt like entertainment. It felt like something else entirely. The champion stood still, a few steps back now, his earlier confidence completely gone. The smirk that once defined him had disappeared, replaced by a tight, controlled expression, one that tried to hold itself together but couldn't quite manage it. He glanced around briefly, as if looking for something familiar, the energy, the control, the advantage, but none of it was there anymore. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't the center of the moment. Ozzy Osbourne was, and the difference was undeniable. Ozzy hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made a scene, hadn't even moved more than necessary. Yet somehow he had shifted everything. The room, the mood, the outcome, all without force, all without effort. The champion swallowed, straightening his posture as if trying to recover some sense of composure. But it was too late for that. You could see in the way he avoided direct eye contact now, in the way his movements had slowed, lost that sharp edge they once had. Respect had replaced arrogance. Not the kind that's given freely, but the kind that's forced, earned in a single, undeniable moment. A few people in the audience exchanged looks, shaking their heads slightly, almost in disbelief at how quickly things had turned. Because it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Not to him. Not here. And definitely not this quietly. But that's what made it hit harder. There was no dramatic finish. No loud victory. No spectacle. Just a shift, a realization, and a lesson that settled into the room without needing to be spoken. The champion took one last step back, creating distance that hadn't existed before. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. Because now he knew exactly what he had stepped into and exactly who had been standing in front of him the entire time. And standing there, unchanged from the beginning, was Ozzy Osbourne, calm, unbothered, unshaken. The same man they had laughed at just moments ago. The same man they had underestimated. The only difference now was that everyone in the room finally saw him clearly. And once you see something like that, you don't forget it. And just like that, the moment was over. No noise, no celebration. Just a room full of people who had learned the same lesson at once. Never judge someone by how quiet they are, because sometimes the ones who say the least are the ones you should underestimate the least. And standing there, without ever needing to prove anything, was Ozzy Osbourne. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe for more.